station where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.
So, if this is directed energy, where would there have to be devices aiming a field at this thing? I mean, well, what I look at is the evidence without having to speculate further, and I can see the same phenomena produced by John Hutchison's work. Okay, how does he do it? He creates a static field, and within the static field interferes various radio frequency signals like microwave.
But he's directing. He's directing from somewhere something.
Well,
to
obviously
that
it's
point.
directed if it's not random. Well, it says it might be, but with the towers, you know it was directed because the buildings across the street were essentially in pristine condition. They weren't even pockmarked from stuff blasting out. So it was directed. But where it's from, that to me is not so important. I've got a question. Do you have a cell phone?
Well, no.
You know, who here has a cell phone?
Yeah.
Okay, you have a cell phone. I'll ask you. When you make a cell phone call, do you know where the tower is?
That's receiving it.
You just know that it works.
Yeah.
Interfering the radio frequency signals within the static field, you just care if it's interfering within there. It's somewhat similar. The phone by itself doesn't work. The cell phone tower by itself doesn't work, but you have to have this within range of that. You don't care where the tower is, as long as it's within range. Same with the static field. And, you know, these various signals, it really isn't a big deal where they came from. What is the biggest deal is what they do. You know, what the effects are of.
Is it? You say it's like an interference thing of other.
Right. It's not like traditional interference. It's not like two coherent beams of light.
Right.
It's that one interacts with the other one, or interferes with it, and unleashes this weird effect, like a conductor being moved through a magnetic field. That action produces electricity. It's like magic. Back then, you know, when it first was discovered, they probably thought it was magic. And again, you know, this 2,400 years until supposedly electricity was discovered, didn't anyone think about, you know, get electrocuted or get hit by lightning? What about tornadoes? Why don't people study tornadoes? You think about the damage that's done, like Topeka, Kansas.
Think of the power and the energy in them if it could be harnessed.
It is amazing, or if you could create it.
Exactly.
And you start wondering about, you know, 9/11. It really looks like that is easily controlled, especially when Tesla kind of knew it could be. And same with those folks back then.
I totally take your point, but I'm just thinking, how on earth, sorry to be pedantic about this, but, you know, would it be a beam? Like, you know, when you flip a television control panel, you've got the invisible microwave. I mean,
Right.
sort of, it's so precise on the buildings. This is what puzzles me.
Maybe there were things planted in the building.
You've taken the words. That was my next question. Yeah,
But-
something to direct the beam,
Right.
to attract it.
But not necessarily, you know, okay, maybe perhaps those remaining core columns that just didn't reach them quite right until they were exposed, you know.
But if they did it with Tower 1 and then Tower 2, how did it do the same kind of effect on Building 7? Which obviously did.
Good point, Debbie. Yes.
But
That's-
what do you mean, what's the?
Well, I mean,
Because
to
if
me,
they
it
had
was
things,
being
devices in the building.
yes directed at
Right.
specific
He's
buildings
suggesting-
at specific times.
Yeah, they would have.
I tend to think it was not in the building.
No, I don't think so.
Because of what, looking at John Hutchison's work, he says the statements from various places, and he has this kind of platform of plywood, whatever's around there, he's got some
Yeah.
hands to it.
Yeah, and something that you didn't talk about today, but which is in the book, was about suggestions of the people within the building suffering some kind of microwave energy themselves, in that it seems like they were being cooked somehow
I think
within
I
the
have,
building.
Really?
Which is, if you there's a very interesting film called
Got it
Star
here.
Wars, called Star Wars in Iraq, and it's medics in Iraq who are baffled by people coming into the hospital, their injuries. And it's a
You
very
mean
interesting
internal
film.
injuries like microwaving or something?
Well, something, a weapon that we
I-
don't understand was being
Right,
used.
something that we've
And-
not seen before.
Yeah.
Mm.
And this is what they call the jumpers.
yes.
First of all, there's like 1,200 of them that left North Tower. I say leaving the building, not
Mm.
jumping, because I don't think it was very many of them were voluntary, if any of them were. And the poor firefighters in the ground who felt helpless. That's got to be the worst human emotion.
Mm.
And one of their buddies, they had to watch him because he was going to go out and try to catch him. He just couldn't handle, you know, being
The
helpless.
velocity. Yeah.
And they were telling how many this was, and here they traded a lifetime to save lives. And they felt so helpless, they'd never seen anything like that before. As they combat, they've never seen people jump, maybe one in their lifetime. But here we have, there's that little wing slot, 105th floor. We're gonna look at this guy. There he is. Not a real clear picture from here, but he doesn't have a shirt on. He's reaching down like he's taking his pants off outside the building. These guys don't have their shirts on, or pants. If it's fire, you wear your clothes. Because it protects you from the fire. And firefighters don't fight fire in the nude. So what's going on here? Why hang outside the building with your clothes on? Unless there's something
Something irritant in the clothes.
Clothes are probably wet. Because if I was in a fire, I'd run to the bathroom and get my clothes wet before we lost water pressure. Or the sprinklers would come on, or I'd be sweating and I'd be wet.
Mm.
Good chance they're wet. And you know, with this crowd control active denial system,
Yeah.
that they say is many times worse if you're wet.
Yeah.
Think of a microwave oven. When you put your food in the microwave oven, you know, dry paper plate, fine. If it's a wet thing, the water molecules get excited.
The active denial system is a very interesting thing to look up as well, because when they've shown experiments with that with journalists, that people can't stand, when it's aimed at you, you can't stand in its beam for more than 3 seconds. People have to
What is this
rush
thing?
away from
Active
it.
denial
And
system.
it's almost like perhaps something
The
like that.
fire,
They had
they
to
did
get
the
away
US
from
now
it.
to control crowds. They fire microwaves at the crowd to make
God,
it
I hadn't
disperse.
heard of that.
Yeah.
What is, what's his name, Hutchinson's situation? So he had his blood taken away from him or something.
Yet again,
So?
yet again. After I went there, like the next day, it was raided. But he's now living in the United States. He's in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's safer there.
He's happier. He's
Where
happier.
are you from?
Vancouver, British Columbia.
All right.
Oh, right.
Well,
Has John Hutchinson been able to turn steel and concrete to dust?
Yes, yes. You saw that piece of steel that came apart. He said some that even continue disintegrating. You go home, come back the next day, and it's, you know, more.
What if you applied a magnet to the dust that steel's been turned into? Is it magnetic?
Oh, good mention. When I was out there, he didn't realize this. When I was visiting him, he had this stainless steel bar that had been affected in the middle, but not on the ends. The magnet doesn't stick to the ends, but it really sticks to the metal.
Oh, interesting.
So it's molecular dissociation.
Totally, yes.
There's also some of those aluminum bars, those extruded aluminum bars, showed the size of Luder's bands on the surface.
Of what
They were
band?
thick. Luder's bands, you know, like if you have a thin piece of aluminum, you have slip lines.
Oh, yes, yes.
And this is like a 2-inch thick chunk of, why is that also?
Mm.
Yes.
Those of us who believe that 9/11 was an inside job by the government, you know, is sort of an outcast, really, in society in a way, but you're kind of an outcast within the outcast.
Well, I'm not within it. I don't consider myself part of the truth movement. I also don't say it's not an inside job, because
No.
how do you know who did it?
But what...
You gotta know what
yeah.
happened first.
I know, you mean, factually, yeah, but I mean...
Well, it's
yeah,
a very
hostility, don't you?
convenient thing, isn't
Other
Oh,
people
yeah,
who
plenty.
say that. I mean,
Plenty, and,
what do you think that is?
well, you know, you think we were planning 9/11, that was pretty amazing planning. Do you think they just forgot to plan a cover-up?
Mm.
Right,
Pretty good terrorists, weren't they? I thought that
Yeah.
immediately it went off. If the most powerful nation on earth can allow this to happen,
And
there's
there are going to be
something
people
wrong.
who are going to come around asking questions. You got to deal with them somehow, so he's heard them. They're
Like
well-meaning people.
Like a, just like, you know, this, what's this, well, we do this.
I never studied the
Slides
JFK
of
thing
land.
beforehand,
One thing,
but I got to see that the grassy knoll was thermite. If you don't like Lee Harvey Oswald, well, we got the grassy knoll for you. You know?
Well, that's
Well,
interesting metaphor, isn't it? Because of the
footage, the Zapruder footage, which kind of gives you one conspiracy, but the deeper conspiracy is that footage was actually manufactured.
Right.
It seems from the evidence I've
Yeah.
seen. So it's like a double.
Yeah, also, I'll just a second, with Building 7, the NIST report called for comments, and I gave comments, but they wanted to ignore them. Then they had the bombs in the building project, and set up the false choice. And they denied or dismissed the bombs in the building, the thermite, whatever, that option, because they said it was silent. The various video cameras that recorded light conversations down the street, in many buildings, going to crash. This one guy was interviewing someone, you can see the building behind it. He goes, whoa, 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 when the building's like halfway to the ground. He had no warning beforehand.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Okay. I called fraud on this for this, because if you're going to use that criteria to dismiss the bombs in the building, they got to apply it to themselves. If you have a gravity collapse of 230,000 ton building, it's going to sound like it's raining dump trucks.
That's right.
How can it be silent?
One thing I've been puzzling over, that is how on earth, maybe you can answer this in some way or other, how on earth can an aluminium tube, which is what an aircraft is, can slice into a real fast steel and concrete building and leave a sort of outline of the plane.
This is the biggest problem I had that day. See this little slice here?
Yeah.
That wingtip can't even hold fuel because it's so fragile, it's just going to light bulb at the end.
Yeah.
And why didn't the fuel rain down? I've always said the
Now, hang on a
outside of the
second.
building.
I want my question answered first. So, yeah. How can a plane slice into a building like that and leave a sort of hole, which is the
I
outside?
don't know, tell me.
I know. But nobody's asked this question at all. Not even the alternative people.
That's a
But
question
some-
I asked, but I need to stay away
Thought I
from that
asked it in the
I have an
because,
argument with people.
because people have too much emotion invested in it.
Mm.
To see straight. So it's kind of a waste, because that is what happened to building.
Mm.
Real airplanes don't turn buildings to powder in midair. Neither
What-
do fake ones. So
What would happen if a plane hit a building like that? The plane would sort of crumple up
Your wings would come
and
off
fall,
it.
and fall down in
you'd
front of
have
the
a mess
building.
on the ground. And
Remember the
elsewhere.
cargo where the Amsterdam office block or tower housing complex?
Yes.
A lot more damage than that.
Yeah.
And how did the plane leave that little mark there for its wing, but not in the Pentagon?
Yeah.
Right, right.
Good question.
Different.
I think the main thing, if I may say, is the fact when they said, oh look, you saw the planes go in, then you suddenly saw all this big
Therefore-
fireball inside, but hang on, the wings, if anybody knows the construction of an aircraft, they're not particularly strongly attached. They're full of the fuel, they were absolutely full of fuel. Wings would have come off, you'd have seen the fuel raining down. Maybe it would have caught fire, doubt personally if it would have done. That's what I think is the biggest con of the lot. You suddenly see this fireball inside, Earth with the lightweight aluminium wings go through those huge big Y-shaped steel things.
A friend of mine said it well, that if somebody gets punched in the face,
Mm.
an hour later the head explodes, doesn't matter what kind of punch it was, or if it was even a real punch, or a fake punch. That's where I've come from on this, is that, a real plane can't do this, neither can a fake plane.
Mm.
There's an
It's the
interesting
getaway car.
YouTube or an interesting film called September Clues, which goes through a lot of the footage to do with things like that. And it shows footage also of aeroplane going into a tower and supposedly going in, but then coming out the other side because the nose tip comes
Yeah,
out.
I saw that
And then it
too.
immediately fades to black.
I think it's designed to get everybody arguing about that, so they don't
Yeah.
realize what happened to the building.
Yeah.
But that's a bit like the straw for the tree, isn't it?
Um,
If it had just stayed there, it would have been okay. The fact it collapsed makes it more suspect. If you can,
That's quite
well, because what you were
Yeah.
saying before about the piece of straw going into the tree,
Yeah,
so they blew
and then
it.
the tree
They
turns
should
to
have
the
dust the buildings.
Mm.
Well, you mentioned, Judy, about, I've heard it on your broadcast, that there's still a problem in the area, they can't build on it, everything deteriorates, and there was a building they repaired and it deteriorated again.
I was worried about this being too long, I didn't add some pictures I took about a month ago when I was there. It looks like they're building these buildings on oil rigs, you know, way up high, about 7 or 8 stories from ground up. It looks like this, that they're encased in concrete. Isn't that what you do with,
Which buildings?
with nuclear waste, you encase it in concrete? The Freedom Tower, what is it called, the new building, it's right over by the area where Building 6 was.
Right.
It's this humongous, thick concrete for about, the bottom like 6 or 7 stories.
Really?
Pretty weird.
Why that would be necessary?
Yeah, they say it's for terrorists.
Terrorists.
Could you take one past them round?
Yeah, sure.
In your opinion, is there a connection between Hurricane Erin and the energy needed to power some sort of weapon?
Oh, thank you.
Is that what you're getting at?
No.
It's not.
No, this myth about, what the gizmo, long schedule for a flood in the hurricane. Take the energy, you're assuming what the mechanism is. You're assuming heat, power, direction, whatever it is. Well, where do you plug in the power when you get the static, spark when you get the doing all that it's a phenomenon. What I'm saying is a different phenomenon that happened on that one. It wasn't a conventional event. I think that pretty clearly shows that there's something different happening that day. And so it is important to look at all of the evidence. I don't know if that hurricane was used. It could have been. It produced a static field. I know John Hutchison uses a static field and interferes within that static field radio frequency signals that cause this effect. So it seems it's possible that here we have this nice static field over Manhattan, and you could run something into it. Which brings me to another issue that's quite serious. We have in the Midwest tornadoes every year. It's Tornado Alley. But in 2008, they suddenly turned into super duper tornadoes. What happened in 2007? 2008. They started making the switch over to digital TV and put in all these brand new radio transmission towers, radio frequency signals. So you get this static field around the normal storm system, interfere radio frequency signals. I'm not saying I know for sure, but this is something we should be
It's a thought.
And that we suddenly each year have these super duper tornadoes.
Sorry, Judy, I've got to go. I'm going to get back to the last train's going. Sorry, how can I get hold of you?
Does he have pamphlets? You can email them.
Yeah, okay.
They're where the towers.
You're going to be in
Leaving tomorrow morning.
You're leaving back to...
U.S. Have me again. Bring me over again, we can organize it better.
We can organise something in London.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. I'll get to the entrance. Thanks very much.
Fine.
Are we in a few minutes?
What time is it now?
I don't know.
9:45.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes. And
Okay.
Because we have to be out of the room in the building by 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Does HARP use a similar kind of technology to the Hutchins?
Whatever happened on 9/11 was classified technology. Classified technology. It's not going to be in the public domain by definition. HARP, we're told what HARP is, but we don't know what HARP really is.
Is that an acronym?
No, we're told what it is, but we don't know what really goes on there. And a lot of people use HARP as a catch-all for the boogeyman that explains whatever happened. HARP
What
is
is
HARP
HARP?
bad,
I'm
HARP
sorry,
bad.
Judy, what is
High
HARP?
amplitude, I have it in my own I call it high amplitude advancement of real propaganda. Because it's, people think HARP this, HARP that. For all we know, that's just a bogus story to get us over here so we're not looking over there.
Yes, quite.
Because if it is classified technology, they're not going to be telling us. Here we have this toy up our sleeves, and we can do this, that. Okay.
It's divide and conquer, really.
Yeah.
basically you get people arguing amongst themselves about the minutiae of it, and you
Yes.
know, you kind of.
And once you start putting a trendy term label on something, you then stop looking at what it does, what it really does.
But it does seem rather convenient that there was this massive earthquake, or not earthquake, hurricane to aid the event of 9/11, doesn't it? I mean, it's not a coincidence, is it?
Especially when it seems like, you know, it was so underreported. It's really bizarre. Like, how did they know it would turn in the nick of time so that the storm surges would have flooded Manhattan? Because it's right at sea level. JFK Airport is right at sea level.
Well, if you cast your mind right back to the 60s, the late 60s, I remember the British papers are full of a story. Do Russians have a machine that controls the weather? Do Soviets have a machine that controls the weather?
That's very well established now, because I think it was the Japan Olympics. They'd had all this dust in the air. They need to get rid of the dust in the air, clean it out for the Olympics. And they even announced that they were doing this cloud seeding thing to make it rain to clean the air for the Olympics. Right out there, you know.
But that then was thought to be not seeding, but some device.
Right.
And I mean, when you think that's nearly half a century ago, so it doesn't really seem so improbable to think that somebody, I mean, I have heard a theory that the Katrina was deliberately directed towards New Orleans.
Oh, it is pretty, you know, there's a lot of coincidences with that too. Oh, I already have my own sense. See, I was
trying
thinking
to save the city, not destroy it, but they couldn't quite work the technology properly, and they sent it bang on course for the city. Have you heard that one?
No, it was only like category 1 or 2 in it. Yeah, but, you know, there's a lot of stories behind that, but instead of looking at stories of, you know, he said, she said, who said, what said, yeah, let's look at the evidence. We do know that something had produced this.
Oh, yeah.
To me, that is the most important thing, because if people know this, you know how people develop free energy technology and secrecy in the basement, they end up suicidal. A lot. Check this out. Now that you've been through this picture means a lot more. This is a display in front of the entire planet that free energy technology exists. That means if everybody is aware of that, people can develop free energy technology in broad daylight.
That would never do the oil giants, would it?
I just wondered, Judy, they did all that in broad daylight. And to make the war on terror, they could have just flown planes into... I do agree, you're right. But to just make the war on terror, they could have just flown planes into the building to suit that purpose. So if they're doing that, what they're really doing is giving the game away about free technology, not straight away, but in 10 years you've worked it out. So
they have to slow it down. That's what truth movement is for.
What are they going to gain from revealing it if we all now want it? Or are they going to have to use it again?
Unless it was a prototype test.
Slow, like enough of the thing to happen for people to be like, all right, let's go and bomb some other country.
It's a psychological attack, and to carry out a psychological attack, you have to create something very spectacular and a lot of impact
to make people buy this Iraq and all the rest of it, the whole.
But planes just flying into the
I
buildings.
agree. I mean, the psychology of it is really. I mean,
To show the enemy is
I'm
fiendish. So.
I'm a psychiatry doctor, so I can understand a little about it. There's a thing in your book, Julie, that really stands out, which is about the power of kind of magic tricks and the illusions, and the fact that on that day you can go back to 9/11, probably remember where you were when you first saw that. It was the most powerful event in our, well, certainly my lifetime, and you were fed on the media the same story over again. You saw
and then abruptly stops.
Plane, and then building collapse, plane, building collapse, plane, building collapse. That's in the brain. That's in the psyche.
It didn't taper off.
No, not at all. And but as Judy said, people behind this would have been very well aware that some people like Judy would look at this and say, "Hang on a minute, there's problems with this," and people like us that would look at it and go, "There's problems with this." Hence, they would have planned something else to try to either slow it down, herd people, which I believe is what the official truth movement is.
And to marginalise
I
us.
do think the fact that it was such a spectacular thing, I think that there is the point that you made, they actually want us to know about this, but over time, that is the only conclusion. Why would they do such a big thing? Not just to go into Iraq or Afghanistan. I mean, it's multi-layered, I think.
But if if I was allowed to bring it out, you know, in 2005, for example, instead of rolling out Stephen Jones, before that came out, it would have hit hard. You would have outrage. Instead, this blunts it.
Yeah, totally.
And it's like 10 years have passed. And I think they've kind of, you know, that was the goal, to go for 10 years. Stephen Jones has now gone back into suppressing free energy again. He came from that. You know that? You know, a lot of people realize that.
It came from what?
You remember hearing about cold fusion, and it got debunked in 1989?
Yeah.
The person who coined the term cold fusion was Stephen Jones. And is, you know, low energy nuclear reactions is very likely the same kind of technology. If I'm going to name this, I'm going to call this magnetic electrogravitic nuclear reactions.
Yeah, yeah.
Very much the same as like cold fusion.
Yeah. That low energy nuclear, is that the thing they were talking about, something fusion, very few years
Like
ago?
cold fusion.
Cold fusion.
But I think the term cold fusion was like, fusion, cold fusion, isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah.
Like space beams. And it's very effective.
We'd be saying that's cold there, you know. So that,
It is.
Yeah, so it kind of, in plain sight, it's revealed in a way. You know.
And if they had tipped over the tower, you know, people say, well, why, if they have such technology, why aren't they using it in Iraq? Well, it depends on what the objective is. If it's to cause havoc, they don't want to use something neat and tidy like this. You know, just keep stirring the pot. But in Manhattan, that was very neat and tidy.
Very.
Just buildings with the WTC prefix. It
We'll
wasn't
probably need
perfect.
to use it again. If they've got something as major as that, and they know they can do that with it, they're not going to just use it once. So
That's why I think the best thing is for us to talk about it and know about
Trouble
it.
is, they've rather uncovered the truth now, if this being the case. They can't very well do it again and blame it on terrorists.
If we know.
And as they say, the terrorists have stolen the technology. I don't know.
This seems to be a slight, I have a slight worry that these folks want to blame it on ET. Say, poor innocent, you know, civilians, they didn't the earthlings. It
Well,
was
ET is a
ET.
very convenient scapegoat. I believe there are plenty of ETs, but I also believe a hell of a lot of what I personally see going on is some kind of technology much nearer to home.
And
it'd be
George
handy to
Bigot
say
had
it's
patented
Chinese
it.
Latin,
You know, they don't
all-
let people have patents like this anymore, but
Mhm.
100 years ago, he has a patent on that.
Well, yes, exactly.
You bet they've developed more since then. But knowing about it is the safest way to keep it from happening again.
The information where unknown forces strike the edge of ecology.